Does life imitate art, or does art imitate life? It's a question that has been asked throughout human history. This philosophical debate is about the ways art either reflects the world around us or influences it. But in the case of SCP-085, the idea of art imitating life takes on a far more literal meaning. This entity was created during an experiment involving two separate SCPs. The first of these was SCP-067, which is a fountain pen that, when held by a user, will take full control of the person's hand and arm. SCP-067 then either writes about or draws something linked to the user holding it. The second of these SCPs was SCP-914, better known as the Clockworks. This massive piece of anomalous machinery will have various effects depending on what or who is placed inside of it, and which of its several settings is chosen on the selection panel. After test subject 1101F was given the anomalous fountain pen, the result on the page was a simple female figure, around 6 inches tall and 1.5 inches wide. She was drawn wearing a summer dress with her long hair tied back in a ponytail, and a single word was written underneath her: Cassandra. As part of the experiment, the drawing was placed inside of SCP-914, and the find setting selected. This is the setting that is known to improve the object placed inside of it in some way. For example, a hunk of steel placed inside will be transformed into a pile of steel carpet tacks, a refined version of the steel. When the drawing was placed inside, something truly amazing happened. Cassandra came to life, or as she now prefers to be called, Cassie. SCP-085, sometimes known as Hand Drawn Cassy, is a completely sentient being. She is fully able to communicate, however it all has to be done non-verbally. Her voice cannot be heard by anyone beyond the page where she was drawn, but she is able to utilize sign language or create writings on the page in order to communicate with Foundation researchers. SCP-085 has been shown to also be capable of understanding text that is written on the same paper she exists on. She is fully animated, aware of her own existence and the limitations of being two-dimensional in nature. According to profiling conducted by the SCP Foundation, she has her own distinct personality. Cassie is good-natured and agreeable, displaying a natural drive and motivation, but also seems to feel the burden of loneliness, living in solitude on the page. It should be noted that any and all attempts to recreate the same experiment that formed SCP-085 had failed to create the same or similar results. Tragically, Cassie might be the only one of her kind in existence, a creation of pure luck with no chance of making another. No wonder she feels so lonely. While Cassie is limited to her two-dimensional form and has so far been unable to enter our three-dimensional world, she has demonstrated several different abilities on the page. Firstly, she is not solely confined to the same paper she was drawn on. SCP-085 is able to transfer herself from sheet to sheet. If another page is placed flush with hers, she will be able to simply step across onto this new page. However, there is a limit to what kind of page Cassie is able to transfer herself onto. She could easily take a stroll through the pages of today's newspaper, but can't just wander onto someone's family photos or anything made of cardboard, glass, or parchment for that matter. SCP-085 can only exist on paper or canvas, and only when they are directly connected to her original page. According to Foundation testing, this is not exclusive to blank pieces of paper either. If Cassie ever transfers herself onto a page bearing a repeated pattern, like a piece of wallpaper, then she will appear to be in the foreground while everything else on the paper appears to be behind her. SCP-085 will perceive each page she enters as a completely new place. From her point of view, pattern pages seem to be like endless space. Additionally, Cassie can also travel to other pieces of artwork and adopt the same art style of each new environment she appears in. For example, transferring herself onto the pages of a comic book will cause Cassie to be rendered in an artistic manner matching that of her surroundings. The same occurs if she travels to an oil painting, watercolor, or charcoal sketch. Interestingly, when appearing in comic book form, Cassie's thoughts and speech are visible through thought bubbles that are commonly used to display text within the comic medium. Her size and the angle she is viewed from also changes to match the different panels of the comic page she is on. At one point, SCP-085 was introduced by Foundation personnel to a print copy of Ascending and Descending, by the famous Dutch artist M.C. Escher. This painting is of a large building, with its roof consisting of a looped, never-ending staircase. When she transferred onto the print of Escher's painting, SCP-085 curiously explored her new environment and was able to ascend and descend the staircase. The researcher gave Cassie the name of the piece and asked for her thoughts on it. She remarked, "It's pretty, I guess. Would make a neat exercise track." When the researcher asked if she noticed anything inconsistent about the staircase, Cassie replied, "No, as far as I can tell, it just loops around, down, up all the time. Why don't more staircases do that? It's pretty neat." Following this, Cassie directly requested more impossible objects or optical illusions to be drawn onto her page and made part of her environment. Unfortunately, her request is still pending review from the O5 Council. Being able to step from page to page, transferring herself onto canvas or sheets of paper is but one of SCP-085's unique abilities. She can also interact with other drawn objects on the same page she is on. If someone draws an item of clothing on her page, or a vehicle, even food or drink, then Cassie would be able to wear, use, or consume those. Objects drawn for her behave as if they were real, but only when Cassie is directly interacting with them. The rest of the time, they remain still, just as they were drawn. Once SCP-085 touches them, these items will animate. This same rule even applies to anything drawn to depict something in motion, for example, trees being blown in the wind or the waves of an ocean. These will also stay perfectly still when drawn, and only move when acted upon by SCP-085. However, much like her ability to transfer from page to page, Cassie's power over other two-dimensional drawings has limits. Drawing anything that would normally be an inanimate object within the real world will provide SCP-085 something that she can directly interact with. But this doesn't appear to be the case for living beings, like another person or an animal that would have its own autonomy and freedom of movement in our three-dimensional reality. Animals and people drawn for Cassie to interact with will remain as static, unmoving drawings, and will not become animated like she is, even if drawn using SCP-067. She cannot impart any of her own sentience or free will onto these drawings, and they remain still even when she touches them. You might think that drawings of other people, whether they are animated or not, might help alleviate Cassie's solitude, but if anything, it just reminds her how alone she is. SCP Foundation researchers have noted that SCP-085 is very friendly towards them and any subjects brought in to conduct experiments with her. Visits from the three-dimensional world outside the page she inhabits seems to offer some relief to Cassie's loneliness. Through much of her behavior, she has shown a fascination with our reality, and in particular she has an interest in cars, expressing that she wishes she had an ability to work on them. This desire appears to be completely genuine too, as shown when her photo was taken with SCP-978, the camera that reveals its subject's inner desires. And in Cassie's case, showed her in a fully realized 3D version of herself working on a car. SCP-085's curiosity about the world beyond the page is most likely due to how different it is from her everyday two-dimensional existence. But on at least one occasion, Cassie's curiosity got the better of her and unintentionally led to a containment breach. From the moment she was first drawn to life, and even after her initial testing with researchers, SCP-085 seemed unaware that she was a two-dimensional being in a three-dimensional world. Foundation security protocols regarding SCP-085 meant that no one on the research team assigned to Cassie was permitted to tell her the truth about her 2D nature. The truth about her existence was kept from her with the best of intentions, as research staff did not want to cause SCP-085 any undue distress or trigger a possible psychological snap. Anything that Cassie raised as an inconsistency or discrepancy within her world on the page was explained by researchers to be the result of her imagination or dreams, and research personnel attempted to convince SCP-085 that she was in a scenario wherein she was the only human survivor, searching for others in a post-apocalyptic environment. However misguided this decision to conceal the truth might have been, it was at least done with Cassie's best interests at heart. But a lie, as they say, is harder to maintain than the truth, and keeping SCP-085 in the dark about her true nature arguably led her to more hardship that may have been avoided if she had been allowed to know the truth. In the incident in question, a Foundation researcher entered the room where the drawing pad that Cassie resides in was found, and they were carrying a paper copy of SCP-085's Special Containment Procedures report. Given that she had already partaken in tests where she had transferred herself to other paper and canvas surfaces, Cassie assumed that this file was yet another new environment for her to explore. The researcher allowed SCP-085 to make direct contact with the report, and she was able to transfer over to the document before the researcher realized their mistake. Whether this occurred accidentally or if this researcher intended to confront Cassie with the truth about what she was, is unknown. Nevertheless, Cassie found herself on the pages of her own SCP Foundation file. The record of every test the research staff had conducted, a full description of how she had first been drawn by SCP-067 and brought to life by SCP-914, all clear as day, in black and white. Cassie's own true nature was presented to her. Immediately, the yarns that Foundation researchers had spun about her surviving an apocalypse began to unravel. It was all a lie, meant to keep her in the dark and prevent her from ever knowing that she was trapped in 2 dimensions. She returned to her original page shortly later, but the damage was already done. Due to her having breached containment and briefly escaped into her own file, a number of Foundation researchers proposed that SCP-085 be destroyed. There was always a risk of this happening again. What would happen if Cassie unwittingly found herself inside another file, with access to more of the Foundation's sensitive information? However, the O5 Council decreed that SCP-085 was not to be terminated, allowing Cassie to continue to exist despite the breach. Ever since she learned the truth about herself, signs of depression have begun to manifest in her behavior. Finding out you are a drawing trapped in 2 dimensions with no chance of ever having someone else for company would be enough to crush anyone's spirit. But luckily, researchers have since managed to uplift Cassie a little and offer her a welcome distraction from her unfortunate revelation. The optical illusions like the never-ending staircase she requested were quickly drawn into her environment. Additionally, given the interest she had shown in a technical drawing of a 1964 Ford Mustang convertible, SCP-085 had been allowed to assemble a car of her own. By transferring each individual component of the car from the blueprint to her page, Hand Drawn Cassy had been gradually building her very own Mustang to keep herself preoccupied from her life in cartoon motion. And in the end, if she can distract herself and find that tiny bit of happiness, isn't that all that matters? In a sense, we're all trapped within our own dimension. Cassie in her 2D one, us in our 3D world, filling our lives with hobbies and entertainment, all in an effort to make sure that we never tug too hard at the threads of our reality and find out there just might be much more out there that we're missing. Now check out